You got it from me.
Thank you.
I was saying a couple years ago, I want to say like 2 years ago, the team I was with, Imhotep, experienced a extreme amount of trauma. Like I can't even really,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
like it doesn't seem real. And I even started taking notes, and I interviewed 2 players. I was going to put something together myself in writing, kind of similar to what you're talking about, just like how do sports impact healing and trauma. And, you know, I'll just give you a real quick rundown. We lost a player. He was going to Penn State on a full scholarship for track. He was murdered the day before he was supposed to leave, about 2 weeks before our season started, after he graduated. Then within that season, 2 of my star players, one is now at Baylor. He lost his father to gun violence in the city. And then another player of ours is at West Virginia, lost his uncle, who a lot of people in the city knew, to street violence. And then on top of that, we had a number of, we had a couple players in foster care, had a player whose mother couldn't make it to senior night because she overdosed. And so we had to walk him ourselves. And the thing that, I don't know if I could say that it ever like started mid-season. It was just something that, I learned from my initial interaction with Miss V at Penwood. Because right when I became a head coach, I kind of knew the X's and O's and how to get kids in and all that stuff. But I kind of also felt like something was missing off the field. And I knew I wanted to do some character building and get into the community and do community service. But I don't know if I personally had the repertoire or experience to kind of get into the emotional intelligence and trauma and how to deal with trauma and best ways to deal with stress. It's not something that I feel like I was ever really taught. So when Miss V kind of, grabbed me after one of my first practices, I want to say I was a head coach for about 2 weeks. And Miss B had been circling the field on the track. And, I came off and she was like, "Hey, coach, like I have this program coaching boys and the men. Would you be interested?" And something about her energy and vibe, I was like, let's do it. And since then, it just kind of grew into a point where now she's like a coach on the staff. And it's funny because, as I've learned a little bit about trauma and healing and emotional intelligence, I think Ms. V is kind of learning more about the X's and O's and able to impact some of the in-game planning. But, I think for me, it really allows the players. It's kind of like, I think for one thing, for a coach, you have to be ready. Because once you kind of open the gate, you never really know what's going to come through.
Oh my God, yes.
And I don't know if everybody's really, first off, I don't know if everybody wants to hear it, but I think on side of that, like most coaches get into it because they want to help players.
Right.
But the problem becomes when, you have a lot of coaches like myself. I'm not from Philadelphia. I grew up in rural Virginia. I mean, I had some understanding from being an assistant coach in Philadelphia, but I've never grew up in the environment that my players were growing up in. So it became something very, intentional that I had to get into. How do I address these issues? Because at the end of the day, if my football coaching goal is to put out the best team product on the field, you can't really do that when your players are hurting off the field, and they're bringing so much baggage to practice. They can't really like let go and be as good as they could be. And then on top of that, it's just giving you an avenue as a coach to let them know that you love them, that you'll do anything for them off the field. And that, I think it's humbling as a coach because a lot of our profession, I think a lot of guys, not that we think we know everything, but are hesitant to allow someone to come in because it's kind of like, this is my area and this is my team. But I think as I've grown as a head coach and as, I've become an assistant now at the collegiate level, you need really good people around you. And it's kind of like addressing that. I always called her like the off the field coordinator or like the community coordinator. And it's just as important as the offensive and defensive coordinator because you need to address that part of our players. So it really like grew into, she was bringing in speakers and it kind of just allows them to hear other voices because, they're always hearing their coach and they're always hearing each other. And it's nice to kind of allow them to have somebody else they can ask questions to because I think Miss B became a trusted confidant. And it really just opens up the players to speaking on trauma. Because ultimately, I think a lot of kids, and, from my experience, the kids I've dealt with, the first reaction is that, like, I can't share this. Like, this is personal information. This is about my family. This needs to stay in the family. I don't know what'll happen if I do share it. Like, will this go farther? What are the the consequences of me sharing it with you? But on top of that, I think, aside from, I've also been an educator for 12 years, the field or the court becomes a much safer place than the classroom, I believe,
Wow.
to share. I don't know if it's just because, you have those regulations and rules of sitting in a desk or kind of away, and you kind of, you grow together as a team from working out and sweating and the blood, sweat, and tears aspect of it. But then, you kind of grow as a family. I think every coach wants to have a family feel. And the field allows players to let their guard down a little bit. And then I think we did a great job, and Miss V did a great job of getting our guys outside of their environment to start seeing some different places, to start feeling like things could be different. If I don't, just because I'm in this environment now doesn't mean I have to necessarily be a product of it.
Wow.
It doesn't mean I have to look poorly on it or look down on it, but I can grow from it and be something amazing from it and be a catalyst for other people in my environment. So it's something I don't think I would ever do without in coaching. I don't think I would ever leave it by the wayside. I've been with coaches that kind of didn't address, prior to me becoming a head coach, the off the field aspect. It was all about the product on the field and the winning part. And it's not that you won't win that way, but you don't win long term. I mean, I had a player last night, Miss V, Jordan Johnson, hit me up. And he was one of our guys from, I think he graduated in maybe like 11 or 12. And he was a rough around the edges kid, had some issues with his parents. We kind of like got him through it. He got to college. He went JUCO, and then he's at East Carolina University last year, hurt his knee. But he just hit me up last night and was like, "Coach, just wanted to thank you." I mean, those are the reasons, like, you pushed me through this. I'm more humble now. He saw that I had moved on, so he was thanking me for that. But it's just those, like, it's a lifelong relationship. Wow. I don't think it stops upon graduation. And I think too, on a personal level, being around the kids and being open with them heals me some too as a coach. Whatever trauma, because I'm really big on, like, if I'm asking you to share, I can't really not be open myself. And it's not that, like, everything, they need to know, but at the same token, I think, we're all humans. And I think as you develop a relationship, kids are sometimes wiser with some, they've dealt with things that I didn't have to deal with at a young age. So it just opened up an avenue that I'm blessed to have been a part of.
Wow. And it sounds like really promoting deeper connection. And I appreciate you bringing up the safety aspect of it and feeling safe in a different environment, a sports environment, than they may not feel in other places.
Right. And I think, as a lot of my assistant coaches too, I really think it's important to get people that are from the community, because I wasn't. So a lot of my initial hires were like youth coaches in the area, because I knew they already had some sort of relationship with the players or alumni of the school. Like, whenever guys ask me, like, I don't have a coaching staff, like, who do I hire? I'm like, go after alumni, go after youth coaches. I mean, obviously you need to do some training. Miss V and I had some eye-opening experiences when she, led some trainings with just the coaches. Because a lot of coaches are, specifically, I think initially she was a little more geared toward addressing domestic violence. And I don't think that's gone anywhere, but I think it's become a bigger, like, all trauma. Yeah. But initially, I remember one of our first meetings with the coaching staff, one of the coaches was like, I think I'm abusive to his wife. And it just kind of, like I said, it's like it opens wounds of everybody. And if you're open to it, I think you're able to use it to heal, but it's difficult for sure.
Just speaking to this real quick, Link, that movie Roll Red Roll?
Yes.
They're making a toolkit for it, and I'm trying to help write for that.
Right.
They want me to write it so that coaches can use it.
Kind of like our whole playbook thing.
Right. And I tell you, it wasn't, for me, everything you just said about, not every coach wants to dive into these issues because they're heavy issues. Right. Not only that, when you dive into these issues, the gate opens, right?
You also got to address some things that sometimes people don't know how to address.
Yeah, like, and some coaches are, just like you said, they from the community. You know what I'm saying? They don't have the first thought about trauma. They don't know anything about. They don't even know they've been traumatized until you start talking about stuff and opening up stuff, and all of a sudden they're like, "Well, I'm an abuser," you know?
Right.
So when we think about giving this toolkit out to, and that movie's so potent, right? That's just hand down traumatic.
And then I'm watching ESPN right before you called, and they're talking about Michigan State, and they had a basketball player who was accused of rape 3 years ago, and the head coach of the basketball team went and spoke to one of the witnesses prior to him being interviewed by the Title IX committee. They ended up exonerating the player, and then just this January he was accused again.
Wow.
And so it's like, it's happening at every level, and unfortunately, I mean, it's a really hard thing to deal with. I mean, it becomes, unfortunately, I mean, for some coaches, it's a fine line. Like, they want to cover up some of these issues, or they want to be naive to it, because if you're naive to it, then you don't have to do anything about it.
Right. Oh my God.
Whereas if you talk about it, you might have some consequences and lose some guys.
Yeah.
And then there's how to bring that guy back into the fold.
Right. There you go again. Because a lot of times, it's cut ties and keep it moving, because I don't want to be associated with you anymore.
And that's not right either, because they got learned behavior from their trauma that they
right.
so bad. Sexual assault in some countries, in some cultures, is not even a word for them.
Right.
It's normal life. How do we build that resilience? I mean, let's face it, the statistics show that half of girls in high school have been raped.
Wow.
Statistics show that.
That's
right.
Wow.
And it's sad, but it's devastatingly true, because there was no real consent given.
Yes.
So that's a whole nother thing. I know I'm going off, but this is all relation to trauma. This is all into relation of prevention. This is
and then I think from your standpoint and what you brought is like, unfortunately, a lot of young men just don't know any better. And that's not an excuse, but if they're never talked to about situations or address certain scenarios, how do they know if their environment is filled with that, or if they've grown up seeing trauma? I think you always say, like, hurt people hurt people. So it's a cycle that if you don't address it to try to break it, it's just going to continue.
It is. I have to agree. It is.
But sports, I think, opens up a whole nother avenue of being able to address it in a deeper manner. Sorry, I'm watching this this event unfold outside of my home. There's, like, I guess a gentleman had set up a tent in the backwoods part, and all these police had shown up. I don't know if y'all see me looking out the window, but I'm trying to see what's going on.
Anything is exciting to look at.
Philadelphia, man. Right.
Anyway, thank you, Coach Link. I certainly appreciate you sharing that.
No problem.